we've made it. We finished our sampler, and the question now is, what do you do with it? In this video coming up, Rebecca's going to talk about one way of finishing it. She will mention washing with a little bit of Dawn dish soap, or if you feel comfortable, throwing it in the wash if you think your stitches are going to hold up. I am a firm believer. I don't do embroidery typically. I do cross stitch, and I am a firm believer in the Dawn dish soap method. Your hands, whether or not you want them to, do get a little bit oily, greasy. Maybe you'll have something on them, and you don't want that to discolor your fabric later on down the line. So just as an example, here are some of my finished cross stitch pieces. This is one I did on my own, and this is one that we did with the cross stitch along. Um, when I finished these pieces, I got a bucket. I got a big, I have a wash bucket. You could just plug up your kitchen sink, put a little bit of soap in there, run some warm, tepid water, and then let your project, so in this case, my case, it was my cross stitch projects. In this case, it can be your finished sampler. Let that hang out in there for 10-15 minutes, and then give it just a nice light squeeze. You don't want to do any wringing or anything like that. We don't want to get it out of shape, but give it a light squeeze while it's in the water, and then you'll have to let the water out, run a little bit of fresh water, kind of maybe do a little bit of this up and down, squeeze through again, and you'll repeat that process a few times just to make sure you get all those suds out. And then my second tip that I like to do is to lay your project out on um, a dish towel or a hand towel, a bathroom hand towel. Roll it up, and then, not like, once again, we're not going to wring it, but we're just going to lay it flat on the dish towel or on your towel. Roll your towel up, and then you can apply pressure with your hands to squeeze as much of the water out as possible. You'll get quite a bit of it out, actually. And then the final step that I always like to do is to put out an ironing safe surface. You can put a towel or something down on that, and then a thin piece of fabric. Lay your finished piece face down, and then lay another piece of fabric over the top of that, and then iron it on dry, because it will still be damp, so that'll give you some of that steam to help steam out any wrinkles. And the reason for laying it flat down is that the towel that's underneath it will cushion and absorb and let the um, stitches kind of fall down a little bit, so you're not losing any of the definition in your stitches. And once you've pressed it out, it will either be dry or close to dry, and you can hang it or leave it somewhere flat to dry the rest of the way before moving on to the next step, which will be framing. And at this point, I'm going to let Rebecca talk about that.
Okay, we're down to the wire. The biggest thing once you're done with all your stitches and you finished it off and you feel good about it is to, I didn't do this on this, but you definitely should, give this a quick rinse in the sink is fine. You can also put it in the washing machine if you feel comfortable with how you secured your stitches. You can give this a quick hand washing. My mom always taught me to use Dawn dish soap, this is not an ad nor endorsement, but your mom may have told you different. But if you have some grease on your hands, you definitely, and you've been working on it, you definitely might want to use something that has a grease cutter in it. And then once you've rinsed it, washed it, let it dry. I would iron it, of course, at this point. But from here, you try to get the hoop as centered as possible. And I feel like our hoop got a little off center while we were stitching, which is fine. and then you slide it over. Oh, I'm going to put that at the top. Now, you can also put this in a frame. There's a million various ways you can do this. Some people stretch it over a frame and then hang it. The most common way is in the original hoop or in a hoop. So basically, we're going to make sure we get it relatively centered and screw it up here. Get it pretty snug, and then you're going to start pulling around the edges just like you did the first time. But with the idea that, whereas before I wasn't super concerned about you getting it perfectly centered, obviously you want to work a little bit harder to make sure that your design is centered the way that you would like within what will be your frame. Okay, so pull on all the edges, keep going. Then you're going to want to keep tightening as you go so that it's secured. I think this is pretty good, not perfect, but pretty good. And honestly, perfect is the enemy of done. So we don't want to be overly focused on perfection. So you've got this basic taut clean surface. And then if you see there's a little bit of a curve, you can pull this way so that it doesn't have a curve. You can make little micro adjustments around the edges. This one's going to be a little more challenging than some other designs because of the way in which it was structured to be pretty straight up and down. Once you reach the point that you're relatively comfortable, there we go. I like that. That's fine. We're ready to secure the back. Now, there are also a million ways to secure the back. I'm going to teach you the most simple and straightforward in my mind. Many people will trim this, wrap this over, and glue it to the frame. I don't know. It feels like too big of a commitment to me to do that, but lots of people do. What I'm going to suggest we do is fold it in and see how much excess fabric we have. And I'm going to come around and trim up the excess fabric. But first, we're going to get a light or white colored floss, at least 3 strands thick. And we're going to put that on a needle, and I'll be right back once we do that. Okay, so there's a couple things I'm going to do that maybe break the rules from what I've previously told you. One is I'm going to go with a strand that's much longer than I had been doing, because we want it to be long enough to go around the entire hoop. So that has to be long enough for that. Then I'm going to come back and just cut off the edges, leaving, 1.5, 2 inches. Like I said, when it comes to embroidery, everything is sort of your personal call, what you're comfortable with, what you were taught, what grandma said, what mom said, what dad said, who knows. So we've got that tightened up a little bit. I'm going to fold it over a little bit. It seems like we can also trim this again. I usually trim it again toward the end. So this is very simple, straightforward. And the fun part about this is we're going to go back to the first stitch we learned, which was the running stitch. And we are going to tie this off in a double knot so it's nice and secured. And then I just start somewhere near the top, and I pinch my fabric and go around. Let's pull this through so the knot is there. And then I'm just going to grab and pinch at about the same place. So we're going to be, about 1 inch out from the hoop. You can go closer. I've definitely been lazier and done a lot bigger. Pinch and pull. So this is a very rough, rustic, if you will, running stitch. And we're running through the fabric, making sure that we kind of yank as we go, so we're getting a little bit of tension there. Going all the way around. This will take a few minutes, or a couple of minutes. And you can see how it's starting to pull in and how it's going to hold it together in place. I've seen people do some really incredible things with their hoops to use them as a frame. I've seen people dye the wood on the hoops, paint the wood on the hoop, so that it's a more colorful frame. I've also seen some really beautiful finishes, especially for professional finishes, if you're selling your work or if there's somebody, you're trying to do something a little more refined or elegant, which is definitely outside my wheelhouse, but I respect it. I've seen people roll it all in, glue it, and then put a piece of felt that they've measured on the back. This will keep the light from bleeding through. And sometimes, I'll show you this when we're done, but once you flip it over, sometimes you can see this ring and people don't really like that at all. And I get it. It depends on where you're hanging it, where it's going. Oh, make sure you don't get stuck there. It really does depend on what you're going to use it for. The other thing I was going to say is that, for stitches, this is one that is meant for display. Although none of the stitches are so fancy that you couldn't put it on a functional piece. But something as you move along you might want to think about is how you're going to finish it and also how you're going to use it. If you're going to use it all the time, you want to make sure to use more sturdy stitches, less fussy stitches, things that aren't going to pull out very easily. All right, so we're back to the start. We're going to pull this nice and taut, make sure that everything is stuck. See how nice and tight that looks? And then we're going to go in again and finish it off. So we're going to pull through and then create a loop knot. We're going to go under this, and there we go. It's knotted. I'll probably do it a second time just because I'm like that. I'm a big fan of double knotting. Oh, look what I did. That's my cat. He's always at my feet. That's part of embroidery for me. Okay. And then put this through the knot, and then we're done. And then I'm going to use my big scissors, my beloved gingers, to tie that. And then look at there. We're done. It's beautiful. Not bad at all. Thanks so much for taking this course, and I really appreciate you getting through all these videos. I'm going to show you a few pieces that I've done and give you some resources for inspiration. And I hope this was valuable to you. Thanks so much. Okay, and then just for some inspiration, I wanted to share with you a couple of things I've made and also talk to you about opportunities online to find incredible inspiration. If you're on any social media platform, you can check Facebook. They have numerous embroidery groups for both traditional and very edgy work. Instagram, check the hashtags, embroidery, hand embroidery, things like that. You'll find some work that will blow your mind and will certainly blow away what I'm about to show you. As a hobbyist, I don't sell these things. I give them away as gifts, and this is actually pretty wrinkled, but it was the best I could pull up. So the thing I did mention before was about function versus decorative. So these are a set of napkins I made that are entirely meant to be functional. So they're a little wrinkled because I pulled them out of the dryer not too long ago, gave them a quick pressing. I don't get too fussy with them. My mother-in-law once just wiped her lipstick right across the front of those. I'm not grudging her for that, but it actually came out, which is the whole point. I'm joking because that's what these are for. The stitches are all pretty flat. I was also learning some of these stitches at the time. I was terrible at what's called the stem stitch, which we didn't learn today. But so I did tons and tons and tons of floral work to get better at the stem stitch. And so as you can see, these turned out nice, but they're not showpieces or anything. So these are fun. And then the thing that I'm currently working on that is more decorative, and I haven't done a ton of decorative work. I've been largely functional, but I'm doing a series of embroidered dresses that were inspired by the first ladies. And I'm starting at the beginning. So these are the earliest dresses. I developed the patterns myself. This was a work in progress, so that's why it looks unfinished. I'm doing a mix of embroidery, and then there's some applique with lace here. And then I'll show you a couple of the other ones I've done in the past year. This is embroidery, but it's also painted linen. So I took acrylic paint and painted the linen. And as you can see, it kind of created like a nice texture. So I'm kind of proud of that one. That's neat. I've never done anything quite like that before. And then I also did this one, which is also painted linen embroidery, and then also some beading stitched in. By the way, all of this, I winged it. I completely made it up as I went along. But this particular dress, I mean, everything that we learned today is in this dress. These swirls are just the split stitch. This is all the split stitch. Up here, I just did little loops. So we learned how to, weave in and out. It's a very similar tactic. You can take the simplest stitches and make them really complicated by layering them, by putting them in places you wouldn't expect. Pretty much, it's endless what you can do with embroidery. So that's one of my favorite things about it. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful to you, and I really appreciate you sticking it out through all these videos. And thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye.
All right. we're all done. I'm going to be honest and say that I did not finish up my sampler yet in its hoop. I will be doing that, but I did want to take some time to make sure I wash and iron it out like I prefer to do. But I will be finishing it in a technique very similar to what Rebecca showed and doing one thing that she mentioned, which is I like to cut out a circle of felt to put on the back just so that when it lays against the wall, it lays nicely and I don't get any light passing through my fabric and maybe showing some of those unsightly ends, which really, that's all part of the process. So I don't know that they are unsightly, they're just part of the art. Thank you again also to Rebecca for showing off some of her projects that she's worked on, which kind of brings us to the final question of now that you've embroidered your sampler, what's next? And I would say if you were able to get one of our packs and have the whole heart embroidery sampler booklet, you have access to the pattern in here, and you are more than welcome to do it again in a color scheme of your choice. You can play around with the numbers of thread that you use. So maybe if you weren't, you didn't like how it looked with the 3 pieces of thread and you want a little bit more thickness or just a little bit more oomph to it, you could do as much of as a whole 6 pieces of your DMC floss in the colors of your choice. Um, you can always go on websites like Etsy or stop by places like Joann's and Michael's. There are a lot of people on Etsy, or there are companies that sell through Joann's and Michael's that have kits available that come with all the tools you'll need. On Etsy, you can also find people who are just selling patterns um, as PDFs that you can print off and then transfer. And you can use Rachel Byers' method of transferring your patterns to fabric, or you can do the method I used, which was I used the Sublime Stitching um, iron-on transfer markers. All you have to do is print your pattern, trace it with the marker, and then you'll be able to iron it onto your fabric. Um, just a reminder, if there are words or you're concerned about it looking exactly like it does in the sample or on the pattern, make sure you're mirroring it before you print it so that when you trace it and lay it down, you're getting the mirror image, or you're getting the right image. Excuse me. There are a variety of transfer pencils and pens that will wash out in the wash. So what I will do for those of you who are wondering what your next step is, who are excited to move on and try more embroidery projects, which I hope is all of you. I hope that you really feel inspired by this. I will have a link in the description notes below to um, a document with some of the different materials you can get to do those transfers, and other suggested materials that we used in this class. Also, just want to recommend one more product or database that the library offers, and that is craftsy.com. If you visit ITPLD.org, that's our website, and under resources, look up our Craftsy database. They also offer with a ITPLD card, or if your home library is another library, check with them to see if they have Craftsy. they offer a few different embroidery classes, so you can keep the work going and keep the making happening. I hope you enjoyed your time. I just want to say thank you again to Rebecca for her time, and I hope you all learned a lot, had some fun, and are really proud of the work that you put into your project. Um, I hope you're not worried about the perfection of it. I hope you see it for the piece of unique individual art it is because of your own personal touch. So, finally, once again, this is Heidi Estrada, Digital and Maker Services Librarian from the Launchpad at Indian Trails Public Library, saying happy making. Oh yeah, and don't forget, send us those pictures. Send us some comments. Send us your questions. The email is digitalmaker@itpld.org. We want to see your progress. We want to see what you've been doing, and we want to know what you think about this because we miss getting to hear directly from you while the Launchpad is closed. So that's all I've got. Happy making. We'll see you again someday in the Launchpad. We look forward to welcoming you back when the time is right.